Hi guys, welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. You know, after all these years of diving into the unknown, Bigfoot still holds a strange kind of grip on me. Not just for the mystery, but for what it says about us, about what we want to believe, and what we're afraid to find. Maybe you felt that too. If so, let me know where you're watching from, and what Bigfoot means to you. I'd love to hear your take. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and join the conversation. We're in this for the long walk through the woods. Now, let's get into it. The summer of '71 was the year everything changed. I was 12. Quiet. Lost. My grandmother, my only believer, had just passed. 3 days later, deep in the Black Pine wilderness, I saw something I was never meant to see. Not the dogman. Not a monster. What saved me was nearly 10 feet tall, covered in thick, gray-black fur, and had eyes that looked back with something terrifyingly human. They call it the Hollow Watcher. No one believed me, but that thing stood between me and the dark, and it never said a word. Years later, I paint. It's the only way to keep the memory alive. People come to see my exhibitions. They ask questions, but there's one painting I've never shown anyone, the Watcher fading into the mist. And tonight, for the first time in 30 years, I'm going back. 3 soft knocks just echoed from the forest line, and I think it remembers me. I was 12 that summer, old enough to know better, too young to turn away when something strange called my name from the trees. Grandma used to say the woods remember who you are. I didn't really understand it until after she was gone. She passed in late June, right when the heat started rising off the asphalt and the fireflies blinked like dying stars. She was the only one who ever listened, really listened, when I told her about the dreams, the shadows in the corners, the faces in the fogged-up glass. Everyone else said I was dramatic, too much imagination. Grandma never did. And then she died. And I didn't say much after that. Benji was the only person who didn't treat me like I was broken. We'd been friends since 2nd grade. Both of us a little weird, a little too quiet, always drawing monsters instead of playing football. His house wasn't really a house. It was a trailer behind another trailer, behind a cabin that barely had running water. His older half-brother, Wade, lived there. Tall, silent, ex-military, the kind of guy who only speaks if something's on fire or bleeding. He was staying up near Black Pine that summer, working some Forest Service job. Surveillance. Mostly paperwork, probably. But he invited Benji out for a week of camping. Said it'd be good for him. Benji invited me. I didn't ask my parents. I just left a note. We took a rusted pickup 2 hours north, past any place with cell reception. When the road ended, we kept going, on foot, through a narrow trail swallowed by pine and silence. Wade didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice had this gravity to it, like it came from somewhere deeper than his chest. I think that's why we listened when he said the campground hadn't been touched since 1959. Said it like a warning, not a trivia fact. The clearing looked like something out of a forgotten photograph. Overgrown fire pit. Half a picnic table. A rusted horseshoe nailed to a crooked tree. No signs of animals, no birdsong, just the wind dragging its fingers through the needles. That first night, the sky was a bowl of stars. We pitched the tent crooked, got eaten alive by mosquitoes, and roasted hot dogs that tasted like lighter fluid. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Wade carved something into a piece of driftwood with his knife, said it helped him focus. He wasn't really babysitting us, just hovering nearby, always watching the edge of the trees. Benji brought up the story he heard from some old man at the gas station. They say every 12 years something wakes up under that mountain, he said, poking at the fire. And when it does, people vanish. I looked up. Wade didn't blink. Don't start with that, he muttered. So you've heard it? Benji asked, smirking. Wade paused. I don't believe in ghost stories, but you've seen stuff, right? Benji pushed. Silence. Then Wade glanced at the trees, jaw tight. There was a summer when I was about your age, he said. Heat wave. I got lost for a couple hours. Might have been heat stroke or malaria. I saw something. Don't remember it clearly. Just a dream. He stood up before we could ask more, walked off into the dark like the conversation never happened. That stuck with me. Not what he said. The way he said it. Benji fell asleep fast. But I didn't. I lay in the tent, eyes open, heart thumping. Heart thump. My fingers traced the soft fabric of my sleeping bag. And for some reason, I remembered the last thing Grandma ever told me. She gripped my hand in hers, so soft, so cold, and whispered, "Don't ever look too long into the dark, Eli. Sometimes it looks back." I didn't know what she meant then. I do now. We were still kids, but barely. There's a line you cross around 12, an invisible one. You don't know you've stepped over it until you look back and the world feels heavier, sadder, more real. That firelight flickering on our faces. The weight of the silence after Wade disappeared into the trees. The way the air shifted, like something bigger than the three of us was breathing just beyond the tree line. That's when I knew. This summer would be the last one we could ever pretend monsters weren't real. Because they were, and they were watching. The morning Wade left, the world felt thinner. Like whatever thread had been holding the forest back had been quietly snipped in the night. He didn't say much, just handed us a small emergency radio, reminded us where the extra water was stashed, and told us he'd be back in 3 days, maybe 4. Then he disappeared down the trail, boots crunching, backpack swaying like a pendulum, until even the sound of him was gone. It was quiet after that. Too quiet. Like the forest was holding its breath. Benji didn't seem to notice. He cracked a root beer and started humming some tune he'd made up. Me? I couldn't stop watching the edge of the tree line. It felt closer than before. Still, we did what 12-year-olds do best. Acted like everything was fine, spent the first half of the day skipping rocks by the stream, arguing about who could catch the biggest fish, trying not to look like we were waiting for something to go wrong. The air smelled like pine sap and whetstone. A kingfisher zipped past so close, I felt the wind off its wings. For a little while, it actually felt like a normal summer trip. We found a cliff wall not far from the stream, streaked with black moss and old graffiti from some forgotten decade. Benji swore it looked like cave drawings. Said maybe this place had once been a sacred ground. I laughed, said he was full of it. But there was something about those shapes, almost erased by time, just barely there. That gave me a strange feeling in my stomach, like we'd stumbled into somebody else's story, one we weren't meant to read. That night, it was cold. Not like temperature cold. Something in the air, like the forest was pulling the heat inward. The fire crackled louder. The trees leaned in tighter. We crawled into the tent around 10, too tired to talk, and zipped ourselves in like caterpillars trying to forget the world outside. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. Not loud, just wrong, like breath. Close, wet and steady, right on the other side of the tent wall. My heart jammed itself up into my throat. I held still, too scared to swallow. Then came the second sound, faint, deliberate. 3 knocks, sharp, measured. On the side of a tree, maybe 6 feet away. Then nothing. Silence thicker than the canvas between us. No wind, no crickets, no rustling leaves. Just that one sound, still hanging there, refusing to die. I turned my head slowly, eyes straining in the dark. I could barely make out Benji's shape beside me, curled up tight in his sleeping bag. He was breathing. Slow, heavy, asleep. It wasn't him. I didn't move for the rest of the night, not even to scratch the itch blooming on my neck. I just lay there, watching the walls of the tent like they might suddenly come alive. I didn't remember falling asleep, only remember opening my eyes again to sunlight and birdsong and a weird feeling in my bones, like something had passed through me and left a shadow behind. I didn't say anything at first, Didn't want to sound crazy. Didn't want Benji to look at me the way people started looking at me after Grandma died. But then he said, "Did you get up last night?" My spine snapped straight. "No," he blinked. "You're sure? I heard something. Like branches breaking? Like branches breaking?" I didn't answer. Just pulled on my hoodie and stepped outside. That's when I saw it. On the tree closest to the tent, about 4 feet off the ground. Mud. A streaky, smeared handprint. 5 long fingers, each one ending in a sharp point, almost like claws. Not bear. Not human. Something else. I called Benji over. He stared at it, said nothing for a long time, then just whispered, "Nope," and walked away. We didn't speak of it again that day. Not because we forgot, but because we didn't know how. It felt like saying the words out loud would make it stronger, make it real. So instead, we kept busy, cooked some instant mac and cheese over the fire, tried fishing again, though neither of us could sit still long enough to care if anything bit. By afternoon, the clouds rolled in, low and silver, and the air turned electric. Storms never came, but it felt like they might, that kind of pressure that messes with your hearing and your heartbeat. Like the world is waiting to scream. That night, we didn't sleep right away. We sat on the log by the fire, wrapped in our sleeping bags, passing a flashlight back and forth, pretending to read old comics. But every time the fire popped, we jumped. Every time the woods shifted, our eyes locked. Eventually, we zipped ourselves into the tent. Benji didn't say goodnight. He just reached out in the dark and touched my arm. Not scared, not exactly, just needing to know I was there. I let my hand rest on his wrist for a second. Neither of us moved it away. The wind picked up around midnight. The tent rustled like something was brushing against it. Not violently, more like a hand. Slow, curious. I held my breath. I swear I could hear it breathing again. That's when Grandma's voice came back to me, like it was stitched into the dark. When the woods go quiet and no birds sing, something's walking that doesn't belong. I didn't sleep again. When morning came, the fire pit was full of ash, and the sky was the kind of blue that felt like it was trying too hard. We packed up the gear like nothing happened. Ate a half-burnt granola bar. Didn't speak. But there was a weight in the air now, like the forest had noticed us. Not as visitors, not as kids, but as something else. I didn't know yet what it wanted, but I was starting to feel like we weren't just being watched. We were being counted. It was sometime in the early afternoon when I wandered off. Not far. Just far enough for the trees to close in around me, for the wind to hush, for the smell of wet stone and pine to thicken into something that felt more like breath than air. Benji had stayed back at the fire pit to patch the tent. We'd found a tear in the canvas that morning, right where something had brushed against it during the night. We didn't talk about that part. Not directly. Just nodded to each other and moved on. But the silence between us had grown roots, stretching into every little thing we did. I'd followed the creek for maybe 20 minutes, stepping from one moss-covered rock to the next, listening to the burble of water as if it were whispering in a language I used to know. The trees leaned tighter in this part of the forest, and the light was thinner, like it had to fight harder just to touch the ground. I wasn't lost yet, but I'd crossed that invisible line where you start wondering if you should turn around. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, tall and narrow, pressed up against the edge of the clearing like a scar on the woods. But it didn't move like a shadow. It breathed, stood, waited. It was maybe 20 feet away, half hidden by the trunks of 2 black pines, arms slack at its sides like it had just stopped mid-step. The thing was big, taller than any man I'd ever seen, 7 feet, maybe more, covered in fur, but not the shaggy kind like a bear or a wolf. It looked sick, gray streaked through the black like ash rubbed into charcoal. Its limbs were wrong, too long, too thin, like a drawing that had been stretched at the edges. Its chest rose slowly. Its face. God, that face. Where eyes should been, there were just two pits. Deep, hollow, not empty, though. Not really. I could feel it watching me. Not with sight. With something else, like it had hands. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The water kept rushing behind me, but everything else froze. My pulse roared in my ears and my knees locked in place. It wasn't growling, wasn't snarling. It just like smoke. It was gone. No snapping branches, no running. One blink and it wasn't there anymore. I didn't scream. I should have. But instead, I turned and walked. Fast, not quite running, not yet, just moving in a straight line toward the light, repeating over and over in my head that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be. But every crunch of leaves under my boots sounded wrong now. Too sharp, too loud. The forest had changed, or maybe I had. I made it back to camp in maybe 5 minutes, or 20. I don't know. Time wasn't right after that. Benji was by the fire, roasting something that looked like the remains of a granola bar on a stick. He looked up and laughed when he saw me. "Dude, you look like you saw a ghost." I didn't laugh back. We didn't talk much as the sun started to set. There was something brittle in the air between us. Like if I told him what I saw, something would crack open and never close again. Instead, I picked up my sketchbook and pencil. The one Grandma gave me the summer before she died. I sat on the log, facing away from the tent, and started to draw. It didn't feel like I was creating something. It felt like I was remembering. My hand moved faster than my brain. The curve of the shoulders. The angle of the jaw. Those hollow sockets. I didn't pause to shade or erase. Didn't even look up. Just pressed harder and harder until the pencil snapped in two. I held both ends in my shaking hands and stared down at the page. It was perfect. Too perfect. Benji walked over and looked at it. He didn't say anything at first. Just stared. Then quietly he whispered, "That's the thing I dreamed about last night." I looked at him. My mouth was dry. "You dreamed about it," he nodded slowly. It was standing over the tent. I couldn't move. I don't think it saw me. But I saw it. That was when we noticed the food. The supply bag, hanging from the branch above the fire pit, had been shredded, not torn by teeth. Ripped, like by fingers. The trail mix was gone. So were the jerky packs. But right there, on top of the crushed oats and scattered wrappers, was a bone. Small? Clean? Too clean? It looked human, but thin, bird-like. Benji didn't touch it. Neither did I. We just sat there, staring at it, like it was going to do something. Like maybe it already had. The night came on fast, too fast. We built the fire high and wide, fed it everything we had. Twigs, pine cones, even the last of Wade's old newspaper stash. The flames cast tall shadows that danced like things trying to climb out of the dark. Benji didn't crack jokes anymore. He sat beside me, knees pulled to his chest, eyes never leaving the trees. I slept with my clothes on that night, sketchbook pressed against my chest like it might keep something out, or keep something in. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend I was home, in bed, with the hallway lights still on, and the sound of my mom's TV through the walls. But all I could hear was breathing, just beyond the canvas, like it was still there, still watching, still remembering me. And when I finally drifted off, somewhere between fear and exhaustion, I dreamed of a hand. Thin, long, reaching out not to hurt me, but to show me something I wasn't ready to see, and deep in the woods, something waited. It wasn't done yet. By morning, the camp didn't look like our camp anymore. The fire ring had been torn apart, logs cracked, ash smeared across the dirt like it had been clawed at. Our backpacks shredded, zippers twisted, pockets ripped open like someone had gone looking for something and didn't care what they destroyed to find it. My sketchbook was still there, but pages were missing, torn out clean. Benji's sleeping bag had been dragged a few feet, one end soaked in mud, the other side slashed open like something with claws had gripped it too tight. I tried to tell myself it had been a raccoon, a bear, hell, a mountain lion on something stronger than instinct, but even my lies were falling apart now. Then Benji came out of the woods, hunched over, limping slightly. His arm was bleeding. It wasn't a gash. It looked more like someone had scraped him with sharp fingernails. 3 clean lines, not deep, but deep enough to keep leaking. The blood was bright and sticky and didn't want to stop. He didn't speak, just stared at me, eyes glassy like someone who'd been underwater too long. I ran over. What happened? He just shook his head. He was watching me. I could feel it. He'd gone, maybe 20 yards to pee. Said he heard something behind a log, turned, and then felt the sting across his forearm. Whatever it was, it moved fast. It didn't growl or roar. It just left that mark like a message. We stood in the middle of our ruined camp, wind dragging the smell of pine and blood around us like a warning. I looked at the trail that led back toward Wade's cabin. The long way would take too long. There was another path, steeper, but shorter, cutting through the ridge to the north. Wade had mentioned it on the hike in, said the old forestry trail hadn't been used in years, but could shave time if you knew how to stick to the game markers. We had to go. We wrapped Benji's arm in a t-shirt and packed what we could into my bag. Most of the food was ruined. The water canisters were untouched. Like whatever was out there didn't care about what we needed, just wanted us to know we weren't alone. I took one last look at the place we'd been calling camp, then zipped my sketchbook into the deepest pocket and started moving. The ridge trail was barely a trail anymore. Roots cracked through the earth like bones trying to escape. Stones slipped under our feet with every step. The incline bit into my calves. And every few yards, I had to stop and make sure Benji hadn't collapsed behind me. He didn't talk, just kept his head down, his breath shallow, eyes darting from tree to tree like he was trying to see something before it saw him. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind, a low rustling, up in the canopy. Then another, and another, and another. Too fast for squirrels, too heavy for birds. I looked up. And there it was, moving, not on the ground, not between the trees, above. Whatever it was, whatever had come down to us the night before, was now in the trees, leaping from trunk to trunk like it didn't weigh anything, like gravity had rules for us, but not for it. The branches barely swayed. But the sound was there, deep and wet and real. Claws scraping bark, a low snort of breath, the sharp creak of something huge shifting above. Benji stopped walking. He looked at me and his lips trembled. I can hear it. I nodded. We didn't run yet. We didn't scream. There was this animal part of us, buried deep in our skin, that told us what to do when something hunts you. You don't make a sound. You don't move too fast. You don't show your fear. We picked up the pace, silent, steady, one foot after the other. But the thing in the trees didn't care about our rules. It leapt again. Closer now. I felt the rush of air above me, a blur in the branches. Then a low, rattling growl. Not loud, not angry, curious. It was playing with us. The trail narrowed. The trees got thinner. We had maybe another mile before the ridge leveled out into the stretch that led to Wade's cabin. And then Benji slipped. His boot caught on a root, and he went down hard. His head hit the side of a rock, and for a second he didn't move. I froze. Behind me, the trees went still. No wind, no sound, no breath. Then a rustle, closer, heavy, slow. I turned and saw it, between two trees, maybe 50 feet back, half hidden in the shadows, but not trying to hide. It stood on two legs. That same black-gray fur, matted down the spine, clinging in places like wet straw. Its arms hung longer than they should, and the claws at the end curved inward like sickles. But its face, It wasn't the hollow-eyed thing I'd seen before. This one had eyes. Yellow, narrow, focused. It watched me, and it smiled, not wide, not like a person, just a little curl at the edge of its mouth, like it knew something I didn't. Benji groaned. I dropped my bag and pulled him up, slinging his arm over my shoulders. He tried to say something, but I didn't let him. I just started walking, dragging, lifting, stumbling forward. And the thing followed. Not fast, not lunging, just there. Like it knew we couldn't outrun it, like it had done this before. I felt my legs burning, my throat tight, my heart hammering in a rhythm that didn't match my footsteps. Benji whispered, "Leave me." I kept going. "Ellie, no," I didn't yell it, just said it like it was the last truth I had left. "If we die together." He went quiet. The last quarter mile blurred. Trees, rocks, my breath. The sound of claws just behind us. I could feel it watching. Smelling, waiting for something. But it never struck. Not then. Not yet. When the cabin finally came into view, I thought I'd made it up. Just a shadow at first. Then the outline of the porch. The windows. The trail camera on the tree. I started to scream, but no sound came out. And still, we didn't stop, because I knew if we stopped, it would stop too. And that's when it would decide we'd made it far enough. I don't remember crossing the last stretch to the cabin. My legs were moving, but my brain wasn't. I was running on instinct. Pure, cracked open adrenaline. Benji's weight dragged on my shoulder like concrete. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The forest behind us had turned into something else entirely. Not just trees anymore. It breathed. It watched. And now, it chased. The moment we hit the gravel drive I thought would be safe. The moment we saw the cabin porch. Tilted, weathered, familiar. I thought that was it. That we'd made it. But whatever was stalking us didn't care about porches or door frames or man-made lines in the dirt. It came crashing out of the trees like a nightmare with bones. Not a blur this time. Not a shape glimpsed through the dark. It stepped into the open. Massive, upright, ribs heaving under mottled fur that clung like moss on whetstone. Its head looked like a wolf, dragged upright. Elongated snout, twitching nostrils, eyes too far apart. Its teeth were yellow and curved inward. Built to hold, not to shred. I pushed Benji behind me. He collapsed against the porch rail, barely conscious, mumbling Wade's name. The thing tilted its head. It wasn't snarling, wasn't baring its teeth. It was studying me, like it was curious what I'd do next. I didn't know what to do. My hands were shaking. My voice was gone. All I had was the pounding in my ears and the weight of every wrong decision we'd made in the last 2 days. Then everything changed. Something else moved. Not from the trail, not from the trees, from the mountain. The air shifted. The sky felt heavier, like a storm was about to split it open. The sound that came next wasn't a growl or a roar. It was lower, older, like a canyon exhaling after 100 years. From the ridge above us, something leapt, and when it hit the ground, the dirt cracked. The creature that landed between us and the dogman wasn't man or animal, or anything in between. It stood taller, broader, covered in thick fur that shimmered brown under the dying light. Its shoulders moved like they remembered wars older than memory. Its face was partially hidden behind coarse hair. But the eyes, God, the eyes, were deep and dark and utterly calm. Not angry, not scared. A silence that knew things we never would. The dogman growled now. Low, threatened. The watcher didn't flinch. For a moment, everything held still. The cabin, the trees, my heartbeat. Then they collide. I've never seen anything like it. Not on a screen, not in a dream. It wasn't just violence, it was history crashing into itself. They moved like predators from different epochs. Jaws snapping, claws tearing, fur flying. The Watcher slammed the dogman against a tree so hard the bark exploded. The dogman bit into the Watcher's shoulder and got thrown 10 feet into a boulder. Neither one stayed down. They lunged, twisted, vanished behind the edge of the trail, then came crashing back, locked in a tangle of limbs and muscle and rage. Benji stirred behind me. What is that? I didn't answer. The dogman shrieked, high and sharp, almost human, and broke away. It leapt for the rocks, trying to escape. But the Watcher grabbed its leg and dragged it back. They rolled again, and this time, the Watcher brought it down hard, pinning it to the forest floor. Then, just like that, it stopped. The dogman stopped fighting. The Watcher stood over it, breathing slow, chest rising and falling like the ocean. The dogman twitched, growled once, then went still. I thought it was dead. But the Watcher stepped back, letting it go. Not finishing it, and the dogman, broken, bleeding, dragged itself into the trees, disappeared into the dark without a sound. The Watcher turned, faced me, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel afraid. I felt small, not like a victim, not like prey, like a kid standing in front of something that shouldn't exist, but somehow always had. We stared at each other. I didn't blink. I didn't blink. I didn't blink. I didn't move. And then it did something I didn't expect. It nodded, barely, just once, like it understood. And in that second, I knew it wasn't there to hurt us. It had been protecting something. Maybe the forest, maybe the balance, maybe even us. It turned and walked toward the woods, slow and steady. Like it had all the time in the world, no limping, no signs of injury even after that fight, just strength. Just silence. I didn't want it to leave. I stepped forward, almost called it. But then my legs gave out and I dropped to my knees in the dirt. Without thinking, I pressed both hands to the ground, head low, like gratitude, like a prayer. When I looked up again, it was gone. Benji coughed behind me and I scrambled to check on him. His skin was clammy and his lips were pale, but he was alive, breathing. I helped him up, dragged him into the cabin, shut the door, and collapsed against the frame. Outside, the forest was quiet again, but not empty. It felt like something had reset. Like a tide it had gone out and left everything just slightly rearranged. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid it would come back, but because I was afraid it wouldn't. Wade found us just after sunrise. His truck's engine came crawling up the gravel like it knew not to wake whatever still lingered outside the walls. I was sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around my knees, watching the trees sway without wind. Benji was inside, half asleep, his fever finally broken but his skin still pale like moonlight through frost. I didn't wave, didn't move, just watched Wade step out of the cab. Eyes scanning the cabin, the torn backpack on the porch rail, the streaks of dried blood on the front door. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at me for a long time, like he already knew. When I finally stood up, my legs wobbled. I pointed to the woods and said, "It saved us." That was all I could say without my voice breaking. Wade didn't ask questions. He nodded once, the kind of nod that carries weight from someplace you don't talk about. Then he walked inside to check on Benji. When he came back out, he handed me a bottle of water and sat down beside me on the porch. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the forest was still listening. I told him everything. Not just what we'd seen, what we felt. The eyes, the noise in the dark, the handprint, the bone, the fight, the Watcher. I didn't try to make it sound believable. I didn't need to, because Wade didn't laugh. He didn't shake his head or offer any kind of rational explanation. He just looked down at the ground and said, "It pulled me out of a rock slide when I was 12. I told myself it wasn't real for a long time. Told myself it was shock or luck, but I know what I saw." He looked at the trees like they were old friends who'd stopped visiting. "Locals used to call it Runu," he said. "Guardian of the Hollow. The one that watches when others hunt. I think that's what it is. Not good. Not evil. Just keeping the balance." He stood up and told us to come with him. Said there was something we needed to see. We hiked out a different direction than would come in, following an old overgrown trail that didn't seem to exist on any map. Benji was slow but stubborn. He refused to be carried. He needed to do this, too. After maybe 40 minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing with a single, gnarled tree at the center. Its bark was twisted and blackened in places, roots bulging through the moss like veins beneath skin. A ring of flat stones surrounded the base. Someone had once carved symbols into a few of them, worn now, faded, but still holding shape. "This is the burial tree," Wade said, voice low. "Long before we came here, the first people left gifts for the forest here. Not because they were afraid, because they were grateful." He pulled a smooth river rock from his pocket and set it down on one of the flat stones. Then he stepped back and nodded to us. Benji knelt first, picked up a small pine cone and placed it on the stone beside the rock. No ceremony. No words, just a gesture. Then he looked at me. I hesitated. Then I unzipped my sketchbook, flipped past the torn-out pages, and carefully pulled the drawing I'd made of the Watcher, the one that had shaken its way out of me. I folded it in half, then in half again, and placed it beneath the pine cone. The wind picked up as we stood there. Not strong, not cold, just present. Wade spoke again, softer this time. "There have been reports of livestock found torn up near the far ridge. 8 so far. Most folks blame coyotes. But it's cleaner than that. More deliberate. I've seen tracks. Wide, deep, clawed." He didn't say dogman, but he didn't have to. He turned back toward the trees, and I felt something shift. A kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full, watchful. Like the forest was acknowledging us. On the way back, we didn't talk much. Benji held his arm close to his chest, and I could see fresh bruises blooming where the scratches had started to heal. He looked tired but steady, not scared anymore. Not like before. That night at the cabin, the stars came out in clusters. Sky so clear it felt unreal. Wade lit a small fire in the pit out back and pulled out an old flask. He didn't drink from it, just held it like it gave him warmth. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed out there, sketching by firelight. The Watcher again, but this time from a different angle, not facing forward, not threatening, just standing in profile watching the sky. At some point, Wade looked over and said, "You saw it, for real. That changes you. Might take a while to know how." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I don't think it saved me because I'm special." He raised an eyebrow. "I think it saved me because I didn't look away." He smiled, barely, like he understood exactly what I meant. Benji came out to join us a little later, wrapped in a blanket, eyes half closed. He sat beside me without saying anything, and together we listened to the fire crack and pop, the wood settling around us like a beast curling up to rest. None of us said goodnight. None of us needed to. Somewhere out there, past the tree line, past the reach of our firelight, something breathed deep and slow. Something that knew we were still watching. And maybe, just maybe, it was watching back. It took me weeks to feel like my body belonged to me again. I don't mean just the bruises, or the way my legs ached whenever I thought about that trail. I mean the way my thoughts still drifted back, uninvited, to the shadows beneath the trees, to the wave that thins eyes. First the dogman, then the one that came for it. The Watcher. After Wade drove us home, everything got quiet. too quiet. Like the air around me was padded. Everyone else just moved on. Benji went back to school with a wrapped arm and a 1,000-yard stare that only I understood. He didn't talk about it much. Not to me. Not to anyone. It was like we had this shared language made of silences. But for me, it didn't end. I started drawing again. Not just like I used to, sketching comics or monsters for fun. These were different. They came fast. Unstoppable. I'd wake up with charcoal on my fingers, my sketch pad filled with images I didn't remember making. I didn't even need to look at a reference. My hand just moved, like I was tracing something that had already been burned into the paper. They were always of him, the watcher. Sometimes standing at the ridge, sometimes crouched beside the creek, staring at his own reflection. Sometimes hidden in the trees, just barely visible through fog. One image bled into the next, pages full of dark strokes and shadows. Over time, they grew more detailed. I started getting bolder with shading, with weight, with silence. And then, one night, I drew something that stopped me cold. It was me, standing in the same place I'd seen the watcher. At the edge of the woods, facing nothing. And behind me, cast long and low, was his silhouette, towering, still, watching. I don't remember drawing it, but there it was. My shape was thin and crooked, my head lowered. The shadow wasn't just behind me, it was over me. I dropped the pencil. It rolled off the table and clattered to the floor, but I didn't pick it up. I just stared at the image until my chest started to ache. I think that was when I understood something I hadn't let myself feel yet. That place, those days, those woods, they didn't let me go. They didn't want to. Part of me was still there, like something had split open, and the piece that stepped back out wasn't exactly the same as the one that went in. The dreams came after that, not nightmares. Not exactly. But not peaceful, either. I'd be standing in a clearing, alone, wind curling around my ankles. No sounds, not even birds. The light would filter through the trees like honey. Warm, golden, but thick, slow. And somewhere behind me, always just out of reach, there'd be the sound of breathing. Deep, measured, not threatening, just there, watching. Sometimes I'd turn, and the dream would end. Other times I wouldn't turn, but I'd feel the breath on my neck. Feel the weight of being seen. It didn't scare me. It broke me. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table while my mom asked me if everything was okay. I nodded, said yeah, smiled. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push either. That afternoon, I took a sketch and folded it into my jacket pocket. I went out into the woods behind our neighborhood, climbed the old oak tree near the creek, and sat there until it was too dark to see my own hands. Then I whispered into the quiet. I remember. That was all I said. But I think it mattered. Back in my room, I started taping the drawings to the walls. All of them. Dozens. Maybe more. My room became something else. Not a bedroom, not a studio. A record. Of what? I don't know. Maybe of a thing that most people never get to see and still walk away sane. Maybe of a part of me I couldn't leave behind. Wade sent me a letter about a month later. Just one page, no return address. Just the words. Not everyone forgets. Some things want to be remembered. He'd signed it with a simple W taped to the back was a photo of the burial tree. New stones had been added. One of them had a piece of folded paper beneath it. I knew what it was. I didn't need to open it to remember what I'd drawn. It was strange how grief and awe could live in the same place. How something terrifying could also feel sacred. I still couldn't talk to anyone about it. Not really, but I kept drawing every night, like a promise or a confession. Sometimes in the middle of a sketch I'd feel it again, that breath, that stillness, that feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. But it didn't scare me anymore. It felt like a memory being sharpened from the inside out. Not everyone gets to keep a secret like this. One that doesn't rot you from within, but roots you deeper, changes your shape. One that teaches you that silence can be a kind of mercy, and that maybe, just maybe, there are things in the woods older than fear, older than stories. And they are still watching, still waiting, to see if we'll look back. Some things don't fade. They settle, like ash in the folds of an old coat, like dust in the crease of an old book. You don't notice them for years, and then one day you run your fingers through the fabric, or flip a page, and there it is, a whisper from a time you thought you'd packed away for good. For me, it came back in the middle of a gallery room. Walls white and silent, lights dimmed to a soft gold. There were a few murmurs, footsteps on hardwood, the clink of glasses from the reception down the hall. But I couldn't hear any of that. I was watching a woman stare at one of my paintings like she was trying to remember a dream that had slipped through her fingers. She tilted her head, leaned in, stepped back. I'd seen that expression before. Recognition without context. The show was called Forest Beneath the Skin. It wasn't a name I planned. It just showed up in my sketch pad one night. I woke up with the words scrawled across a blank page. Charcoal dust smeared across the edge like something had moved through the drawing in the dark. There were 14 paintings in the exhibit, all of them taken from the sketches I'd started making after that summer. Some I reworked. Some I left raw and jagged, exactly how they poured out of me. Most people thought it was myth, metaphor. That was fine. I didn't owe them the truth, but one painting never left my studio. It hung behind a curtain, away from the spotlights. I couldn't bring myself to put it out there. Not because I was scared, because it felt like a door. It showed the watcher, his back to the viewer, stepping into fog that melted into forest. Shoulders slightly hunched, one hand hanging at his side, fingers relaxed, the other reaching forward, not quite touching the mist, just grazing it. You couldn't see his face. That was the point. It wasn't about what he looked like. It was about what he left behind. That night, after the exhibit closed, I found myself back on the road without planning. A long stretch of cracked asphalt curling north through hills I hadn't seen since I was a kid. The air changed as I drove. Grew colder, cleaner, like I was rising out of something heavy. By the time I reached the edge of black pine, the sky had shifted into that deep velvet blue, just before full dark. No moon. Just stars. Millions of them, blinking like old memories. I left the car near the old ranger station and started walking. No flashlight, no phone, just the crunch of gravel and the rhythm of my breath. I knew the way. Even after all these years, my feet remembered. The forest welcomed me like it never forgot. Branches arched over the trail, creaking softly in the breeze. The scent of moss and dirt pulled at something in my lungs that had been asleep for decades. I moved past the spot where Benji fell, past the ridge where the fight ended, and deeper, toward the hollow, toward where it all began. I reached the burial tree just after midnight. It looked smaller now. Not because it had shrunk, because I'd grown around it. The stones were still there. New ones, too. People had been here. People like us. I stood there a while, let the silence settle over my skin like dew. Then, behind me, 3 soft knocks echoed through the trees. Not loud, measured, like a memory tapping your shoulder. I didn't turn at first. I just smiled. And then I closed my eyes. Because I knew what I'd see. Not a monster. Not a legend. Not something waiting to hurt me, but something that had been waiting to be remembered. I breathed in, and the forest breathed back. And in that breath, I knew. Some things stay. Not because they're haunting you, but because they're holding you up from underneath, where no one else can see. Sometimes, the most profound truths aren't written in books or etched in stone. They're whispered between the trees, buried beneath silence, and carried quietly in the spaces we rarely look. Not everything that finds us is meant to be explained. Some things come to remind us of who we are, of what we've forgotten, or of what we've dared to feel and never quite understood. This story wasn't just about fear. It was about what grows in the soil of fear. Courage, trust, the quiet choice to protect something even when we don't understand it. Sometimes, we walk into the unknown not to conquer it, but to be changed by it. And in those changes, the ones that don't always show on the outside, something ancient and deeply human awakens. Because wonder isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive with thunder or flash. Sometimes, it's the sound of a branch snapping in still air. The hush between heartbeats. A moment when the world pauses just long enough for you to realize you're not alone in it. That's something else, something older, sees you and still lets you pass. And maybe that's what matters most. Not what we see, but how we choose to carry the memory of it. Not how we explain the impossible, but how we live after it has touched us. There's a kind of grace in holding space for mystery, in choosing reverence over fear, compassion over control. We live in a world that moves fast, that demands proof and logic and answers that fit inside tidy boxes. But there are places and moments that don't belong to that world. They ask for stillness, for listening, for something deeper than knowing. In those moments, we don't just witness a mystery. We become part of it. And if you've ever felt it, even just once, you'll understand this truth. Not everything that watches from the dark means to harm you. Some things are just waiting to be seen. And when we choose to see them, really see them, the world becomes larger, quieter, and somehow more alive. Thank you for walking this path with us, for feeling, for wondering, for remembering. If this story stirred something in you, we'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next journey into the wild and the unexplained. Because there's always more waiting in the quiet. And some stories, they find you when you're finally ready to listen.